Here. Okay, no, door. Hi, I'm Chris.
Oh, hi, I'm Chris.
And I'm Betsy, and together we're As We Go. And today we invite you to go with us as we go and explore some history here in Ringgold, Georgia. Hi, today we're, excuse me, hairball. Hey, we are down in Ringgold, Georgia, or up in Ringgold, Georgia, depending on where you're from and viewing this. And one of the fun things we have found as we're in our travels are the little tidbits and nuggets of local history that are around. Here in Ringgold, Georgia, we found some great Civil War stuff, like this train depot here that we'll be taking a look at. It was built in, okay, I gotta cheat and get out my notes, I'm sorry. Sometimes it pays to have a script written out, and we're gonna use it. It was built out of native, you know, I'm gonna wanna film this from the other side. And then some of the bits of history that are here from during the Civil War was April 12th, 1862. Now, April 6th and 7th was the Battle of Shiloh over on the other side of Mississippi. 1862, April 12th, what happened here was called the Great Locomotive Chase, or Andrew's Raid. And it ended just 2 miles down the line here when they had to end the chase and abandon the locomotive. I'll tell you a little more about that as we go along. There's a lot of history down here in Ringgold, Georgia. Like all the volunteer regiments that fought during the Civil War. But one of the neat things that's here that we've come across, we were here 3 years ago when we got our coach, Miss Emmy. And one of the great things we did get steered to that we're glad to come back and share is the historic Ringgold Depot. It was built in I think it was 1949. I'm going to get out my notes because I won't remember all this history that's here from where I looked it up. Yep, 1949. It's built out of native sandstone. Oops. Repeat. Chris pointed out I said that wrong. It is 1849. Chris is running the camera for me. 1849. I'm going to back up and just redo that. It was built out of native sandstone in 1849, and the walls were 14 inches thick. And man, if those walls could talk the tales they could probably tell us. It saw a lot of the local Civil War history here, like the Great Locomotive Chase. Now, if you haven't heard of the Great Locomotive Chase, that happened on April 12th, 1862. And basically what happened is the Union wanted to cut off the Confederate supply lines between Atlanta and Chattanooga. They were surrounding Chattanooga, they wanted to capture Chattanooga and force the Southern armies, the Confederate armies, back down into the Deep South. But to do it, with the terrain and everything, one of the best ways to do it was to disrupt the rail service. And a civilian by the name of James Andrews came up with the plan. And his plan was to basically steal a locomotive. He got volunteers from the Union Army, and they became known as Andrews Raiders. And what they did was they made their way south down to what was at the time called Big Shanty, north of Atlanta. There was no telegraph service at the whistle stop, water stop there at Big Shanty. It's now called Kennesaw. If I butchered that name, I'm sorry, Georgians. But down at Kennesaw, formerly known, like I said, as Big Shanty, and there was a passenger train coming north out of Atlanta called the General. and they basically hijacked the train. They disconnected the passenger cars, so they only had a few boxcars plus the general train engine, and they made their way north. While they headed north, they were trying to tear up the rail lines, burn the bridges. That didn't work. It had been raining. Everything was too wet. And make their way north while along their track of destruction. Would have worked great, except the conductor from the general was back there at Big Shanty. He grabbed two guys and they began chasing the train on foot. Okay, it could only go about 14 miles an hour. And stopping to disrupt stuff, and for southbound trains, they were able to keep going. They actually eventually picked up a hand car. From the hand car, they then commandeered another Confederate locomotive, and then another one, because every time those disrupted tracks, they had to change trains, literally. They eventually got the Texas, which was headed south, and proceeded to use the Texas, running it backwards all the way up until they could catch up to the general. The general, in the meantime, finally ran out of fuel just 2 miles north of the depot here. And at that point, Andrews Raiders abandoned the whole thing and scattered. They were rounded up, they were captured, ended up being tried, convicted. Some of them were executed. Some escaped, and others went out in a prisoner of war swap. And many of them did receive among the first of the Medal of Honors that were given out at the Civil War. But that's not the only history that was here. All right, I need my next page. All the way down my next page. There we go. November 26, 1863, this depot anchored the defensive line for the retreating Confederate Army, the unit that was out of Tennessee, the Army of the Tennessee, at the Battle of Ringgold, or the Battle of Ringgold Gap. I've found both names about that as I did some quick research this morning. Battle of Ringgold Gap anchored the defensive line on November 27th. The Union forces came in close enough, they began an extensive bombardment. And that's why the depot looks as it does today. All the dark color you see is the original sandstone. But everything that is light colored, all along the top, and even like some patches, that's all repair work from the bombardment. This station has been in constant use, not just as a depot, because now it is a community center, but it has been in constant use since it opened in 1850. So like I said, there is a ton of history down here. When we get in these smaller communities, it's fun to kind of, oh, cool, says the gal. You're here for a short time, said the lady at the campground. You need to go check out our historic train depot. We're glad she steered us that way. And it was kind of neat to see the history that was just related to it, just here in this little patch of ground. Well, I hope you enjoyed this quick little peek at some Ringgold history. If you liked the video, do please give us a thumbs up. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And flag the notification bell if you want to know when our things come up as soon as they're posted. We are going to try and get on a weekly schedule for you. So again, thanks again for watching. We really appreciate it. Y'all take care, safe travels to you, and who knows, as we go, maybe we'll see you on the road. God bless.